because of the way we're set up here, we can't show you Mr. Ramos, but he's sitting right in front of us here, and he can hear and hear your responses. So please proceed.
Before we start that, so you took Subisa. Were you intoxicated when this crime was committed?
Yes, sir.
You were. Just wanted to clarify that. Okay, so what we're going to do, and I'm going to start a stopwatch here. We're going to do 15 minutes, strictly 15 minutes on both sides. Again, whoever wants to talk, that's up to you. We agree that Jack and Francis should talk first. And if you want to kick it off, and then from there on, whoever wants to jump on, just unmute your mic when the opportunity arises and say what you need to say. Don't repeat anything, because otherwise you'll just cut into somebody else's 15 minutes.
And I would also say that Mr. Vargo, who is the prosecuting attorney out in Rapid City now, has asked that he also be allowed to speak. And we told him we'd put him at the end. He requested that he be at the end of the opponents here. So we'll try to accommodate him by leaving a few minutes here at the very end. Okay, go ahead.
If you're ready to start, go ahead. Jack and Francis, you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Debbie Jo Martinez's mother. Francis went. My thoughts on Jack, Joaquin Jack Ramos. I wish Joaquin would stand by what he says. I really thought he meant what he said at the last parole hearing, that he did not want to hurt us anymore. I guess it was wrong.
This is the mother of Debbie Martinez, the one that was, don't walk in my show.
3 children.
You can listen.
Are all grown up now, but she didn't.
First, the people that are against him getting out.
Oh.
The baby she was carrying never got to give a chance to life. We miss our daughter so much, and the grandbaby that we never got to meet. Watch the children and grandchildren grow up through the years without her. It brings tears to our eyes with every milestone in their lives. I have no anger, and I wish no harm.
Excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me a moment. Would everyone mute your mics? If you're not muted, then when you move around or you make a noise, you interrupt her presentation. So whoever it is that just joined us here, I think is it Jessica? Looks like Jessica Cruz. Okay, you're muted now. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay,
continue.
I have no anger, and I wish you no harm. I put Jack Ramos in God's hands in the beginning. I believe God has kept his promise. He knows his heart and mine. Jack took our Debbie's life, and his unborn child's life. That is his burden to bear. He said he loved her. Maybe he did. But his need for to control everything was greater than his love. And with this said, I want you, the parole board, to really hear that he has not changed, because he made this promise to us that he would not hurt us anymore and he wouldn't do this anymore. And here we are in the middle of an epidemic, and we can't meet him face to face. And I hope that you'll go back through all your records and see this has been done time and time again to us. I don't know what more to say, but I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, and I'm a wife. And I would not wish this on anybody, to have to relive this every 8 months or whenever he chooses to bring it up. The one thing I can say is that I don't hate Jack Ramos. I hate what he did, but I don't hate him. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, we have used 3 minutes so far. Whoever else wants to speak, go ahead. And this would be the people that are against the parole.
I'm Dottie Bender. I am Debbie Jo Martinez's sister. Sorry, this is still hard for me this day. I raised Debbie's kids and I took care of Debbie's kids. And that's what I'm going to focus on today. Because all the years that have went past, nothing has changed for them. They all still have issues. That's why none of them are here today. I'm going to start with Jackie. When this happened, Jackie was very young, between the age of 6 and 8. A 6-year-old and 8-year-old should never went through what Jackie went through. The molestation from Jack, the beatings from Jack, watching her mom be beat, and her life being taken by her mom. No child should ever go through that. And now Jackie is 34 years old and through her whole entire life has struggled. And still to this day struggles with men, struggles with having pride in herself and everything. And it is so hard, and they can't even do this to this day because it brings it back to everything. And it just messes them up for months. And then you have Justin. Justin was 9, 10 when this happened, and he's seen the same thing. He's seen his mom murdered. Talk about manipulation. Jack manipulated that little boy to think he was an investigator, to watch my sister and would pay him, to watch my sister and what she was doing. And he feels to this day that when this happened, and my sister called my mom and told her she couldn't do it anymore, that he went and told Jack that Debbie had talked to my sister. He feels he killed his mother. No kid should ever live with that either. And then to see your mom die. And now Justin is 36 years old. And still you cannot talk about his mom at all. Nothing. He goes into baby mode when you talk to him about it. And then you have Augustine, that was 11, 12 when this happened. And he tried to protect his mom. And when it came to trying to protect his mom, Jack beat him. And Debbie then took him and sent him away. When he came back, when my sister, we took her and got her out of there for Thanksgiving, and she wasn't going to go back. She was so afraid for her life. My sister would call me and tell me the only way she would ever get away from Jack was in a body bag. And you sit there and say, this is an accident. No. When they called me and told me my sister was gone, I knew he did it. And then Augustine comes back at Thanksgiving. Debbie has to hide him in a closet so Jack won't find him. When Jack finds him, he puts a gun on the table and tells him, if you want me out of here, kill me. Now Augustine is 34 and has a very bad drinking problem. And you can't talk about his mom either. So in the 26 years that Jack has been in there, let's see, Jack has manipulated his own son. His son came down there, knew nothing about what was going on. His son cried and left with us. Jack has sit there and said he's such a good person. Then why did Jack get in trouble for alcohol, or not alcohol, cigarettes and all that stuff in jail? In my mind, Jack has not changed, and my nieces and my nephews still to this day, 26 years later, we cannot have a conversation about their mom, and they still feel everything from the day that Jack met Debbie to the day he took her life as real. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. We're 8 minutes in. Whoever wants to speak next, go ahead. Again, we're talking about the people that are opposed to the parole.
Hello, may I take this opportunity?
Yes.
My name is Kyle Chase. I'm an attorney for Senator Mike Rounds, and I'd like to take a moment to read a letter on behalf of the senator. While I was governor, Joaquin Ramos was granted a commutation of sentence as recommended by the board in July of 2008. As a result of that commutation being issued, Mr. Ramos' sentence was commuted from life in prison to 150 years. As I have disclosed to the board in a previous correspondence from January 2011, the victim's family members did not have the opportunity to share their views on a potential commutation of sentence before the commutation was granted. The notifications from the Department of Corrections Victim Notification System were not received by the family members. I had the opportunity to visit with several of the family members while I was still governor. The family members expressed concern of the potential threat Mr. Ramos would pose if granted parole. I believe the preferences of the victim's family members should be given strong consideration. As I wrote to you in my January 2011 letter, quote, had I had this information at the time I was reviewing his request, my decision would have been to deny his request for a commutation, end quote. Therefore, I write again to you today as you consider parole for Mr. Ramos. I do not support Mr. Ramos being granted parole. Thank you for your consideration of my thoughts. Signed, Senator Mike Rounds.
Would you send that letter for the file? Oh, we have,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, we have the file. We have a copy. That's fine. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, we're 10 minutes and 20 seconds into the 15. Who else wants to speak? I know Mr. Vargo wants to speak, yeah.
He does. This is Donna Cassidy, Deputy Sister. I'll make it very, very quick. You've heard the atrocities that Ramos has done to my family. What I ask you, the board, very clearly, is while Ramos has taken classes to better himself, and I appreciate that, he's not around women, he's not around children, he's not around alcohol. How are you going to keep women safe if you release him? How are you going to keep our family safe if you release him? We will not be safe. He has not changed. He continues to manipulate. I'm proud that he's done what he has done, but he belongs behind bars, and your job is to keep us safe. Please. That's it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else before Mr. Vargo speaks?
Okay, my name is, can you guys hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, my name is Carla Bender. Debbie Joe Martinez is my sister. This is still very, very hard for me to go ahead and do and talk about. Like we've said, 26 years later, it's still hard. I can remember my sister being there for me for everything. Once this madness came into her life, she kept me away. I didn't understand at the time why she was keeping me away, because I was 16 years old. And the thing is I thought that she didn't want me around, that she didn't love me, but after finding out what a monster he was, she was only trying to protect me from him, to make sure that he didn't do anything to me like he did my niece and her. It's so hard because she was there for everything. If I had a bad moment, she was my second mom, even though she was 11 years older than me. She helped me so much, and he took the glue that held our family together. We're so good, but nothing like what she held us together. This is what I look at every day before I go to bed. I have to look at a picture of my sister every day before I go to bed and when I wake up in the morning. This is the only way my two kids at 9 and 17 years old get to see their aunts. Her grandkids come in the house and was like, is that my grandma? That shouldn't have to be the way that they do it. Jack should take responsibility for his actions of what he did. Alcohol or no alcohol, he was going to do this. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. We're 13 minutes, 34 seconds into this. Anybody else want to speak before Mr. Vargo speaks? I guess it's your turn, Mark. Go ahead.
No, we got one more. Sorry, we couldn't get off mute.
Okay, one more. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Angela Hansen, and I am the ex-wife of Joaquin Jack Ramos. Debbie, unfortunately, was the 5th victim of domestic violence, and ultimately the one that lost her life. I beg the parole board to look at the documentation that was sent in, talking about his actions, talking about his record, talking about all of his behavior in the past 20 plus years, and please take that into extreme consideration. All of our safety is at risk, and we hope that the board listens to our pleas and accepts them and denies his parole. Thank you very much, and we appreciate all of the efforts of everyone that has taken the time to talk against his parole. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're getting down to the wire. We're actually 14:52, so Mr. Vargo, you're up next.
Thank you, sir. When I first came to the first parole hearing for Mr. Ramos, I was really, honestly, very worried. I didn't know who he would present as or what he would be like. And I was certainly worried that I was going to disappoint the family if I agreed that he had shown sufficient changes to warrant the consideration of parole, whether by a two-person panel or by the full board. When I walked into that first hearing and I heard the story he told, it was the same lie that he told at sentencing. It was the same lie about protecting those children, that he was the hero of the story, protecting those kids from an outside force, being forced to use deadly force, and then when Debbie tried to stop him, accidentally killing her. And while I believe that he did not intend to pull the trigger at that moment, he was pistol whipping her with a gun so he could take that gun and threaten another person who had done him no injury but had simply tried to subdue him, had wounded his pride, and it has challenged his manhood. He denied the facts, and at the end of that hearing, when he had to hear from Ms. Wendt, Frances Wendt, Debbie's mom, he was so angry with what she said that he stood up, and the way he stood up, threw his chair backward, knocked it over, in the most controlled environment possible. When confronted with a woman who didn't agree with him, Jack Ramos revealed that he is unchanged, that he reacts with anger to being challenged, and he particularly reacts with anger when being challenged by a woman. We have seen that time and again, even in these parole hearings. His gift, I suppose, this time is that he doesn't have to be in the same room with the women who are speaking on behalf of Debbie Jo Martinez. But I believe that his temper is unchanged. His acknowledgement of his behavior remains unchanged. Time and time again, Ms. Wendt, Ms. Bender, all of the people that have come to speak against his parole have said that if he had shown change, if he had shown an acceptance of responsibility, that they would certainly be amenable to considering supporting his parole. If he can't even come to that moment, I believe that it shows that he remains unchanged and he remains a danger, if not to this family, certainly to the family or the person, any woman with whom he is involved and who dares disagree with him.
Thank you. We've gone a little bit over 17 and a half minutes, so we're going to give 17 and a half minutes to the other side. So whoever wants to go first, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Roger Barron, and can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm organizing witnesses for Mr. Ramos, and there's a number of people here who weren't going to talk anyway, but they're joining us, and I'm not going to take the time to read their names. We have 4 or 5 people who did not plan to talk. When I get done talking, I have Robin Zephyr and Mark DeBoer, both of whom represented Mr. Ramos in 1994 at the guilty plea. I think it's important that they talk. I also have Stephen Snyder and Denny Davis, who were involved in the ABP program at the prison. I think it's important that they would talk. I have Wesley Coons and his wife Jessie and Andy Foster, both are former inmates whose lives were changed dramatically as a result of Joaquin's efforts while they're incarcerated. I also have Jim Peterson and other witnesses. 15 minutes is not going to allow everybody to talk. Those who are talking, I do ask that you take this into consideration, and hopefully we can move as far down the witness list as possible. I've done much investigation into this. There is a Supreme Court opinion that repeats the facts. I urge you to read that opinion if you haven't read it. The facts are that her death was accidental. The facts that I've investigated show that she interfered with Joaquin in a struggle as he was trying to go elsewhere. The gun accidentally discharged, killing Debbie. It was a tragic situation. At that time, Joaquin did not know he had even shot her. He did not know what was wrong with her. He was holding her in his arms when she died and when the paramedics came in, or whoever came in. Her son, Justin, Joaquin does not know this of his own. He has no recollection of this. Of course, he was intoxicated. Justin told the authorities that as they were there and he was holding her as she died, they both apologized to each other for what happened. Once again, Joaquin had no idea the gun went off. It accidentally discharged. Those are the facts. And as a result of those facts, the assistant state's attorney who handled the case at the time wrote the following letter to encourage a guilty plea. He said, as I expressed to you earlier, it is my belief, and in fact the reason for both the charge and the plea offer, that the death of Debbie Martinez was accidental, in that I do not have any reason to believe that Jack Ramos intended or contemplated her death as a result of the actions he took. Mr. Vargo wrote those words encouraging a plea bargain. We do not have a jury trial. We do not have findings. We have a plea bargain. The facts are the facts. It is what it is. And at this point in time, they've morphed tremendously from the other side. Nobody on our side has tried to change the facts. Joaquin has never tried to make less of those facts. The other side has tried to make more and more out of those facts. Joaquin has accepted the facts as he remembers them, as they were established in the plea and as established by the South Dakota Supreme Court. Now, at this time, I'd like to turn it over to, go down the witness list. I'd like to turn it over to Robin Zephyr.
Good morning, everybody. It's a terribly tragic situation anytime a life is lost. And I'd just like to ask that everybody that's involved in the decision-making in this matter take a moment and understand the humanity in every facet of what's been talked about, what's been lived, the journey of everybody involved. Before this morning, I smudged sage over myself and actually the computer that I'm on right now in hopes that we could generate some type of healing energy through the airwaves. I hope that the principles of peace, unity, tolerance, and love can find its way through all the pain and anxiety and hurt and remorse. I think your job as a board, as a preliminary board in this case, concerning Mr. Ramos, is certainly a difficult one, but you cannot truly make that decision without the matter and the addition of the empathy of all those involved. And it is very heartbreaking to hear the stories of the family of the loss of their loved one. However, representing Mr. Ramos at the time that this happened, we were very familiar with those events that occurred as well as those that happened immediately thereafter. There was no pistol whipping. Let's be clear about that. The facts of the case as they were investigated was that there was a gun that was on the bedpost in the bedroom. Jack was drunk. He was angry at this friend that was outside. He unfortunately, in a tragedy of human life, anytime alcohol and firearms are mixed, there's bound to be tragedy. It always seems to be the case that when there's any type of discharge of a firearm, that those
You seem to have lost the feed, Mr. Zafir. You seem to have
bullets
lost
seem
the
to
feed.
seek out human flesh. And in this, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Jack had grabbed this gun, unfortunately, in an attempt to go out and scare the gentleman in the front. Debbie came through the front door at that time. She was concerned that she wanted to calm her fiance down, so she tried to block his way toward the front door. And in that process, and I don't have a gun myself, so I just picked up this caulk dispenser, but it's not nearly the same size. But the gun itself was a cheap old .22 pistol. It was, we looked at it afterward. It had a hair trigger failure in it. It was just an old, cheap gun. Anyway, that was the gun that Jack had in his right hand. And when he was trying to move Debbie out of the way, he had the gun in his right hand, and in the process of taking her body down to his left is when that gun discharged. And the bullet, unfortunately, took the most fatalistic path through Debbie's body that one could imagine. He did not even realize that the gun had discharged, because once the gentleman took off in the car, Jack turned around and he saw Debbie laying there. And of course, he went over there to find out what was wrong with her, saw her bleeding near her shoulder, and that she was losing life, essentially. So he picked her up, held her in her arms, and that's where she died. So I don't want the board to misconstrue or have the facts misconstrued before you, because there was no pistol whipping. That is a fallacy designed, I believe, to inflame the moments. It was a purely accidental death, thus justifying the manslaughter plea. And he did plead guilty. This is something that he was so sickened by what had happened that he wanted to take his own life that very first day. He was puking in a wastebasket when we first interviewed him at the jail. These are things that the immediate onset of that moment in time, as one of those moments in our humanity, is that a man killed his fiance. He came to grips with that. That is a moment that he will forever repeat in his life. However, he does realize that act itself has spread like a cancer throughout the lives of many people just because of that one act. So the board, I don't want to take more time, but I would just urge you that this man has proven that he has value to society. He has done 27 years. I would ask that the board take into consideration all these facets. He lost a loved one too. And I would say, please pass this on and grant the parole.
Next person in line, we are at 9 minutes and 5 seconds. So whoever wants to go next, go ahead.
Okay, I believe that would be me. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Coming through? Okay. Thank you, members of the board, and to everybody involved, to Jack, for letting me speak. I want to reiterate first that nothing that I say here is meant to minimize the loss of Debbie Jo Martinez. And the pain and suffering that everybody has had.
Could you tell me who, identify yourself, please?
I'm sorry, yeah. My name is Mark DeBoer, and I was one of the attorneys that represented Jack back in '94. Okay?
Go ahead.
My apologies. I thought that was evident in my video. But anyway, again, I want to emphasize that nothing I say here is meant to minimize the loss of Debbie Jo Martinez. It's certainly not to minimize the feelings that people have and the pain and suffering that everybody's had regarding this case. I do want to flesh out a few facts. I wrote the brief to the Supreme Court, and I look at the appellate brief to try to refresh my recollection as to the facts of the case. I would indicate that regarding the matter that Mr. Vargo said that he pistol whipped her, these are the facts that I fleshed out from the record at the time I wrote the brief to the court. It appeared, and from the preliminary hearing transcript, it appeared to Justin that Debbie was trying to block the door and that Ramos appeared to be trying to get out of the door and go somewhere. It further seemed to Justin that Ramos was mad at somebody other than Debbie Martinez. They wrestled a little bit as Debbie Martinez tried to pull the gun from Ramos. He did grab Debbie's hair. Ramos brought his other hand down, which held the gun, and the gun struck Debbie on the back of the head, which is a different context than the idea that he intentionally pistol whipped her, as opposed to struggling to try to get her out of the way. Jack recalled that he was just trying to move her out of the way and try to get past her through the door. I think that's important in the context of understanding whether he intentionally tried to hurt her or simply try to get her out of the way and go forward. The element of intent, I think, is important there regarding what had happened. Obviously, what happened later is a tragedy. Again, I don't want to minimize that in any way, shape, or form. Loss of Debbie's life is paramount here, obviously. I will say this about my representation of Jack. And Robin related to it a little bit earlier. When we first had an opportunity to interview Jack was the day of the initial appearance. We went in and talked to him that day. I saw him actually in morning court as I walked by. And he was extremely despondent. He stood out. He was just, out of the people that were there waiting for their initial appearance, it was just obvious there was something wrong of a paramount nature. You could just see it in his body language and everything else. As you walk by, and I went to the court for another matter. Talking to him later that day, he was barely able to function. He didn't have the ability really to address us. He was shaking. He was crying. When we were able to finally get something out of him, his general demeanor was that he just wanted to die. And Robin is correct. When we were able to talk to him a little bit longer, he threw up. And this went on. This kind of demeanor went on for a while before we were able to actually get him to speak. I mean, a number of days. All throughout our representation, Debbie's life was paramount in all our discussions and all of our focus. What had happened to Debbie and how Jack viewed it was very paramount in his thinking all the way through our representation of Jack, all the way through to the sentencing took place. And I might make one note along those lines. When the Supreme Court wrote their opinion regarding our appeal, the Supreme Court did make this on page 5 of their opinion. They related the trial court heard testimony, read letters from several parties before sentencing. The trial court also read a psychiatric evaluation, which the doctor found Ramos oriented, alert, and responsive. He was tearful in discussing Debbie's death and preoccupied with her loss. Ramos showed symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. He was also experiencing guilt related to causing the death of an innocent person he loved, but the doctor felt it was guilt appropriate to the situation. The psychiatric evaluation reveals Ramos attempted an overdose of a prescribed drug while in jail. Obviously, the family of Debbie were tremendously affected. But I just want to make the note that Jack also was affected, that this matter was not something that he contemplated or desired. Go back in the testimony also where it said it appeared to Justin that Debbie was trying to block the door. Further seemed that he was mad at somebody other than Debbie. And I think the relationship, the events that went on that day, the children were taken out of the house at one point. He thought they were being removed, and he went to try to get the gun, as he relates, to scare off the Mr. Gibbon who had the children and Mrs. Gibbon, or I don't know if his wife, but a significant other in any event, to have the children come back. And that was the intent, as Jack related to us at that time. Now, again, all of that ends up in a very tragic set of circumstances. Again, I don't wish in any way, shape, or form to minimize the loss of Debbie Martinez by making the statements I'm making. And I'm sure Jack felt the same way. Certainly he did when I represented him. Again, this was a constant theme in our discussions, was the loss of Debbie Martinez. And for the most part, early on in our representation of Jack, he wanted to die. He didn't want to be there. He didn't care about his own personal safety at that point in time. So I haven't had an opportunity to speak to him in a long time, but I know that was something that was just a constant in our discussions. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that and know that he took responsibility and he did enter the plea. He did know that he did something wrong. It's very clear from the very initial discussions we had with him, and he was tremendously sorry for what had taken place, and felt tremendous guilt over what had taken place. So I just wanted to relate that to the board for the board's consideration. We asked the board allow this to move forward to the full board for full consideration part. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have 1 minute left. 1 minute left. Whoever else wants to speak. 1 minute.
Steve Snyder.
Go ahead.
I work with the Alternatives to Violence program in the prison. I've been there for 15 years, and since 2009, Joaquin Ramos has been one of our trained facilitators working in that program inside. He's done 28 weekends over that time. These are about 20-hour weekends each, and I worked with him personally on 9 of those, the others with other members of our outside team. He's one of our best facilitators in my judgment. He's caring. I've seen him work with inmates that are struggling, being with them, very positive in that respect. And I just want to say one more thing. You know, one of our Native American facilitators likes to say that we all have a bad dog and a good dog in us. And the one that grows is the one that we choose to feed. And, you know, in our workshop, I've done many of these, 56 of them over the last 15 years. I observed that some men, you know, they keep feeding that bad dog year after year, repeating the same mistakes that got them into prison in the first place. And then I see people like Joaquin, and they use their time there to learn, to mature, to grow. I believe, you know, looking over his record that we haven't had time to really look at here, that he's chosen to feed his good dog. His work at the AVP is just one example of that. So I just, you know, it's a tragedy, the situation we're in, but I want to commend the work that I have seen Joaquin do and the change that I've seen in him over the last 9 or 10 years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We've gone, again, now we're 45 seconds over what the other group had, so the testimony will end. And I apologize for making this a short process, but we have 18, 19 other interviews to do today, and we can't spend all day on this. If we get beyond this COVID situation, this pandemic, and we have a future hearing, I'd suggest you come here and we'll let you all talk as long as you wish, but that's the way we did it today. So with that, we're going to have a few other questions of the inmate in this case, and then we will close the hearing. So thank everybody for their testimony today. You can all hang up now. Thank you.
It's Donnie. Can I just ask a question? Is there a reason why we can't stay and listen to your questions of Joaquin?
You can stay on if you want to. Yeah, you can stay on if you want to. That's fine.
I appreciate it.
Yep.
Be sure you're muted if you're not.
Yeah, just make sure you're muted.
Thank you.
Did you have any additional questions?
I have no further questions at this time.
Okay, what we're going to do is we will discuss your case and we will let you know what we've decided by the end of the day on Friday of this week. Okay? Thank you.
Mr. Ramos, have you kept a copy of your plan? No. Okay, we have not seen it before today, so I'm going to make sure that they make a copy for you, so you have one for your file. Thank you. All right. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. You can all sign off now if you'd like. We'll proceed with our the next person.